My name is Helen. I am 62 years old, and what I am about to tell you today will forever change the way you see your own family. Just 3 days ago, my daughter-in-law pushed me and my son off a cliff more than 100 feet high. As I lay broken and bleeding, I heard my son whisper 4 words that saved my life. Mom, pretend you're dead. Before I continue, I want you to take a second to subscribe to this channel, because what you're about to hear is a story of betrayal, survival, and secrets buried for decades. And trust me, you don't want to miss what comes next. The weeks leading up to that trip were filled with small but telling signs. Melissa visited us more often than usual, always bringing something from the bakery or a new gadget for the kitchen, as if she wanted to remind us how thoughtful she was. But behind her smile, I felt something else. Her eyes would wander across the house like a predator studying its prey, calculating the value of every piece of furniture, every picture frame, every square foot of the home we had built with our hands. Robert didn't see it. My husband had always been trusting, sometimes to a fault. He told me I was imagining things, that Melissa was simply being considerate, trying to be part of the family. She calls you Mom, he said one night while brushing his teeth. That means something. Helen. But to me, her sweetness felt rehearsed, her hugs too tight, her concern too convenient. One night, after another of those dinners where she asked about our insurance policies and the value of the land, I confided in Robert. Don't you think it's strange? I asked quietly as we washed the dishes. Why is she so interested in our finances? Robert hesitated, his hands still in the soapy water. For a brief moment, I saw something flicker in his eyes, something like doubt, but he quickly shook his head and forced a smile. She's just practical. Maybe she doesn't want us to worry about these things when we're older. He kissed my cheek and went to bed, but I knew he hadn't convinced himself any more than he had convinced me. Then came the night that confirmed my fears. Melissa called with a cheerful voice, suggesting the mountain trip. It will be wonderful, she said, her tone as bright as sunlight. A hike, some fresh air, a picnic. We can take photos with the valley in the background. It will be a memory for life. Robert lit up instantly, but I froze. I remembered the story of a neighbor who had fallen on a trail years ago. The mountains were dangerous, unpredictable, and the way Melissa insisted on that particular location felt deliberate. Are you sure it's safe? I asked. Of course, she replied sweetly. Even children could walk that trail. Don't worry, Mom. We'll take care of you. The words made my stomach turn. We'll take care of you. In the following days, Melissa came over twice to help us prepare. She brought energy bars, bottled water, even a new camera she said she wanted to use to capture every special moment. She placed her hand on mine again, just as she had the night of the will signing, and repeated, "This will be a trip we'll never forget." The night before we left, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake in our bedroom, staring at the ceiling, listening to Robert's steady breathing. Finally, I whispered, "What if this trip isn't about making memories? What if it's about ending them?" Robert turned to me, his brow furrowed. "Helen, don't say things like that." But I could see the unease in his eyes, the shadow of fear he didn't want to acknowledge. The morning of the trip, Melissa arrived in our driveway with a bright smile and a shopping bag full of snacks. Michael carried a brand new hiking backpack with ropes, lanterns, and even a small first aid kit. It should have reassured me, but it didn't. It felt like part of the act, like props in a carefully staged play. The car ride to the mountains was filled with cheerful music. Melissa sang along, her voice sweet and steady. She pointed out wildflowers by the roadside, told jokes, and laughed as though this really was a happy family outing. Michael drove carefully, stopping at every light, every stop sign, his hands tight on the wheel. I noticed the way Melissa would glance at him, almost like she was controlling the rhythm of his breathing. After 2 hours, we reached the trailhead. My heart was already pounding, not from exertion, but from dread. The place was beautiful, with tall trees swaying in the wind and the distant sound of a river echoing through the valley. But to me, it felt like the stage of an execution. Melissa handed us water bottles and granola bars. "Ready for the adventure?" she asked, her eyes gleaming with something that wasn't joy. The trail began gently, winding through pines and moss-covered rocks. Birds sang overhead, and the air smelled of earth and sap. If not for the weight in my chest, I could have believed this was just another family hike, but every step felt like walking deeper into a trap. Melissa walked ahead, snapping pictures of wildflowers and trees, her laughter carrying back to us. Michael stayed behind me, occasionally placing his hand lightly on my back as though guiding me, but his touch felt uneasy, almost guilty. Robert walked beside me, silent, his jaw clenched. After an hour, the trail grew steeper. My legs ached, and Robert was breathing harder. Melissa turned back and smiled. "We're almost at the lookout," she said, though I knew from the map it should have been another hour away. Her lie confirmed my suspicion. She had chosen a closer, more dangerous spot. Minutes later, she pointed to a rocky path veering off the main trail. "Look at that formation!" she exclaimed. "The view must be incredible. Let's climb up and take some photos." My stomach twisted. The path was narrow, the rocks loose, the drop on either side terrifying. "I don't know if that's a good idea," I said carefully. "It looks dangerous." But Michael was already walking behind me, guiding me toward the path, while Melissa skipped ahead with her camera. "It'll only take a few minutes." "Mom," she called, "the photos will be spectacular." Spectacular. The word echoed in my mind, sharp and cruel. Spectacular for who? For the police who would later find our bodies? For Melissa, who would inherit everything once we were gone? When we reached the top, the view was breathtaking. The valley stretched endlessly, the river gleamed like silver, and the mountain stood proud in the distance. But I couldn't see beauty. I saw the abyss. "Stand here," Melissa instructed, pointing to a spot frighteningly close to the edge. "I want the valley in the background." Robert and I hesitated, but Michael's hand tightened on my shoulder. His eyes were full of something I couldn't read. Fear, shame, love, all mixed together. We moved where she wanted. Melissa raised her camera, her smile finally dropping into something colder, harder. "Smile," she said. "This is going to be your last photo." And then, with a sudden lunge, she shoved. The world tilted, the ground vanished, and the sky spun above me. Robert's hand slipped from mine, Michael's scream cut through the air, and gravity claimed us. I remember the rush of wind, the tearing pain as rocks scraped my skin, the brutal impact that knocked the breath from my lungs. I thought everything was over, until I heard Michael's whisper, so faint I almost missed it. "Mom, pretend you're dead." I forced myself to be still. Ignoring the fire in my ribs, the blood in my mouth, I lay motionless, every muscle screaming to move, while above us I heard Melissa's voice, calm, steady, rehearsed. "They're gone," she said. "Now it's all ours." And at that moment, I knew with terrifying clarity that this had never been about love. It had never been about family. It was about inheritance, about power, about her need to be the only one left standing. That was when Michael spoke again, his words ragged. "She wanted us gone. All of us. Do you know why?" I swallowed blood and tears, forcing my voice into a whisper. "The inheritance." He was silent for a moment, then let out a bitter laugh that turned into a cough. "It's worse than that. Mom, there are things you don't know, things I never told you." My heart pounded harder than the pain in my chest. "What do you mean?" Michael's voice cracked. "Dad knew. He suspected, but I kept quiet. I thought maybe it was my imagination. Or maybe I was afraid of what it would mean if it was true. But Melissa, she never loved me, Mom. Not really. She loved what I could give her, what we had, and she wanted it all for herself. I wanted to reach for him, to hold his hand, but I couldn't move. My body screamed in agony, but my mind screamed louder, demanding answers. "Michael," I whispered, "tell me everything." He coughed again, the sound wet and painful. "It started years ago, after the wedding. At first it was little things. She'd ask about your savings, about Dad's business, about the land. She'd act like it was just curiosity, but there was always something in her eyes, something hungry. I closed my eyes tighter, remembering every question she had asked, every time her hand had lingered on mine when she talked about the future. I had felt it too. The hunger. Michael continued, his words slow and heavy, each one costing him. I thought it was normal. I thought she just wanted security, a safe life. But then, I found papers. She had been looking into ways to get power of attorney over you and Dad. She had spoken to a lawyer without telling me. She wanted control of everything. I felt ice spread through my veins. "Why didn't you tell us?" His silence was an answer in itself. "Finally," he whispered, "because I was ashamed, because I thought I could fix it, that if I gave her what she wanted, she would stop. But she never stopped, Mom. She only wanted more. A wave of grief and fury crashed over me, heavier than the pain in my body. "And now," I whispered. "And now she's finished the plan," he said, his voice trembling. "She pushed us, Mom. She made sure, because as long as you were alive, she wasn't the only heir. With both of us gone, she has everything." I wanted to scream, to rage against the rocks, but all I could do was lie there, silent tears cutting paths through the dust on my face. Then I heard her again, Melissa's voice. Faint but unmistakable, somewhere above the gorge. "They're gone. I'll say it was an accident. Everyone will believe me. Poor widow, poor daughter-in-law. Everyone will pity me." Her laughter carried on the wind, chilling and triumphant. I bit down hard on my lip to keep from sobbing. Michael's whisper reached me again, almost too faint to hear. "Mom, we have to outlive her lies, even if it means pretending until someone finds us. Promise me." I forced every ounce of strength left in me into a whisper. "I promise." And so we lay there, broken, silent, waiting, not just for rescue, but for the moment when the truth could finally break through the web of Melissa's lies. Because the fall was only the beginning. The real nightmare was yet to come. If you're still here, hit subscribe. The darkest part is just ahead. Melissa's voice carried faintly from above, every syllable cutting into me like broken glass. "Poor Helen, poor Michael, such a tragedy. But accidents happen, and accidents can't be undone." I could hear her pacing near the cliff's edge, rehearsing the lines she would later deliver to the police, to the neighbors, to anyone who would listen. Her tone shifted from cold triumph to feigned devastation with such ease that it made my skin crawl. "Oh God, no, how could this happen?" she wailed suddenly, her voice ringing through the gorge. "They slipped. They fell. I tried to save them, but it was too late. It was a performance. She was practicing her grief, molding it into something believable. And she was good, too good." Michael stirred beside me, his breath hitching in pain. "Don't move," he whispered again, his words broken, each one torn from his lungs with effort. "I won't," I breathed back, so softly I could barely hear myself. We lay there motionless as Melissa's voice faded. I imagined her walking back down the trail, wiping fake tears from her cheeks, preparing to greet any hiker or ranger she might meet with her carefully crafted story. By the time she reached town, she would be the grieving widow, the devastated daughter-in-law, the only survivor of a terrible family accident. "She thinks it's over," Michael rasped. "She thinks she won." But she hadn't won. Not yet. Pain throbbed through my body, relentless, but my mind clung to one truth. We were alive. Broken, yes. Bleeding, yes. But alive. "Michael," I whispered, "we need to hold on. We need to last long enough for someone to find us." He coughed, blood staining his lips. "What if no one comes?" "They will," I said firmly, though I had no certainty. "This trail isn't empty. Someone will come. And when they do, we'll tell them everything." Michael turned his head slightly, his eyes dull with pain, but still sharp with fear. "We can't just tell them, Mom. We need proof. You know how she is. People believe her. She'll twist everything. She'll say I was careless, that you slipped. Without proof, it's her word against ours." He was right. I had already seen how easily Melissa could shift her voice, how convincing her act could be. If we confronted her with only our broken bodies and our truth, she would bury us under her lies. "What kind of proof?" I asked, though dread already churned in my stomach. Michael closed his eyes, grimacing as a wave of pain shook him. Dad was starting to see it too. He kept notes, bank records, conversations. He suspected Melissa was planning something, but he didn't know how far she'd go. He coughed again, his whole body trembling. "There's a folder in his workshop, hidden under the false bottom of his tool chest. Everything he gathered. It's there." The revelation hit me like another fall. My husband, the man who had always tried to see the best in people, had known. He had suspected Melissa long before today, and he had kept it from me. "Why didn't he tell me?" I whispered, tears burning my eyes. Michael opened his mouth, closed it, then finally muttered, "Because he was afraid. Afraid you'd see what he saw and it would destroy you." A sob clawed at my throat, but I forced it down. This wasn't the time. If Robert had left us proof, then maybe, just maybe, we still had a chance. The hours crawled by. The sun shifted slowly across the sky, shadows deepening in the gorge. My throat burned with thirst, and every muscle screamed for relief. But we didn't move, not when birds fluttered overhead, not when a distant voice called from another part of the mountain, not even when the wind howled through the rocks. Because Melissa could return. She could peer down at any moment, and if she saw us alive, she would finish what she started. As night fell, the cold set in. My body shivered violently, pain magnified by every tremor. Beside me, Michael's breathing grew weaker, more labored. "Stay with me," I begged him in a whisper. "Please, son, don't let her win." His eyes flickered open, glazed with feverish pain. "Mom, there's more. I need you to know. In case I don't say that." I cut him off fiercely, but he continued, voice thin as thread. "Melissa wasn't alone in this. She's been talking to people who lent me money." The words chilled me to my core. "Money? What money?" Michael coughed, his body convulsing. "Business. I tried to expand, took out loans. She said she had connections, that she knew people who could help, but they weren't banks, Mom. They weren't safe. And when I couldn't pay, they came after me. After us. She said the only way out was the inheritance. Debts made the fuse. Greed lit the match. The ground seemed to vanish beneath me again, though I hadn't moved. My son, my quiet, reserved boy, had been drowning in debt, and Melissa had twisted that desperation into a weapon. She said, if you and Dad were gone, everything would be mine, that I could fix everything, that we could start over. I was stupid enough to believe her, until I realized she didn't mean we. She meant her. His voice broke, and so did my heart. Tears ran down my temples, soaking into the dust. "Michael, you should have told us. We could have helped." He shook his head weakly. "I was ashamed. I didn't want you to see me as a failure, but Melissa, she saw everything, and she used it." Silence fell between us, heavy and suffocating. Above, the stars began to pierce the darkness, cold and distant. At some point in the night, I heard footsteps again. Light, deliberate, accompanied by the faint click of a camera. "Melissa, perfect," she whispered to herself. "The rescue teams will find the photos, the grieving widow, the tragic accident. They'll never suspect a thing." Her laughter drifted down like poison. Michael's hand trembled against mine. "Mom," he breathed, so faint I almost thought I imagined it. "If she comes down here, she won't," I whispered back, but I wasn't sure. For hours we lay frozen, listening to the occasional rustle of animals in the brush, the shifting of rocks, the whisper of Melissa's voice fading into the night. By dawn, exhaustion weighed heavier than the pain. My body felt like it no longer belonged to me, but as the first light touched the gorge, I heard something new. Voices, human voices, distant but real. "Over here!" someone shouted faintly. "Tracks on the path!" Hope surged through me, painful and sweet. Rescue. But then I remembered Melissa's words, her rehearsed story, her practiced grief. She would be ready for them, and if we weren't careful, her lies would bury us deeper than the rocks ever could. I turned my head slightly toward Michael. His eyes fluttered open, barely focused, but alive. "Son," I whispered, gripping his bloodied hand with all the strength I had left. "Hold on. We're not done yet. We're going to survive this. And when we do, the truth will come with us." The voices grew clearer, then fractured into orders shouted across the rocks. Ropes rasped, carabiners clicked, and the smell of nylon and sweat drifted down into the gorge. I kept my eyes at a slit, barely breathing, my hand still locked inside my son's. If Melissa was anywhere near, one wrong blink could cost us our lives. "2 victims confirmed," a deep voice called. "Female looks unresponsive. Male has shallow respiration. We need medics down now." Boots scraped stone. A shadow crossed my face. A gloved hand hovered near my lips, waiting for the faintest brush of air. I gave him almost nothing, just the ghost of a breath, enough to keep me alive, not enough to betray that I could hear every word. "Pulse weak but present," another rescuer said at my side. "We packaged them both. Assume spinal and chest trauma. Let's move." Above us, someone asked a question I could not make out. A woman answered, her grief smooth as a polished stone. "Melissa." "We were taking pictures," she said, voice breaking on cue. The rock crumbled beneath them. I screamed. I tried to grab them. God, I tried. Silence followed. the kind of silence that believes. Then the clatter of a stretcher cage lowering, the hiss of static over a handheld radio, the ritual of rescue performed by practiced hands. They slid a rigid board beneath me, strapped my forehead, my shoulders, my hips. Each strap tightened the ache until it bloomed like a starburst behind my ribs. I kept still. Stillness was my shield. They lifted Michael next. He groaned, barely, and the medic nearest him murmured something soft. "Hang on, buddy. We've got you. You're not alone." Not alone, I thought, and swallowed a sob. When they began the ascent, the gorge turned into a tunnel of motion. Rope above, rope below. My body swaying in slow increments as the stretcher crawled skyward. The sky widened, the light sharpened, and then there were faces. Strangers haloed by sun, squinting down with open concern. While just past them, a face I knew too well. Melissa stood in the shade of a juniper, one hand pressed to her mouth, the other clutching her camera strap. Her eyes skimmed my body without touching my eyes. She needed me to be gone. She needed my gaze to stay shut forever. "Is she whispered. "Alive," the rescuer said. Brisk, professional. Critical, but alive. A flicker crossed her expression, a fault line in the mask. Then tears, swift and plentiful. "Oh, thank God," she said, and wavered on her feet like someone overtaken by grief. They rushed us to the landing zone. Wind, dust, hands that knew exactly what to do. An oxygen mask, a voice in my ear. "You're safe. Stay with me." Then the helicopter dropped us into light and noise and people who fight the dark for a living. Bright lights, a corridor of rushing feet. Voices volleyed around me, vitals, imaging, orders clipped and precise. The mask fogged with my breath. I kept my eyes semi-closed, the line between feigning and fainting narrowing to a thread. They parted us at a steel-framed doorway. Michael's stretcher peeled away. For a heartbeat, panic flared, wild and hot. Then the medic's hand returned to my shoulder. "He's going to imaging," she said. "You're both still with us." They wheeled me into a room with ceiling tracks and monitors that bloomed and pulsed. Tape tore. Scissors flashed. Rings clicked against a tray. The world was edges and sounds, and the hovering hope that if I stayed small, the truth could grow big enough to be seen by someone who mattered. A nurse came near. Young, quick, steady-eyed. Her badge read a name I tried to fix in memory. Nina, perhaps, or Inez. She checked the monitors, the IV, the dressings. When she bent close to adjust the mask, her eyes flicked to mine. I let one lid lift a fraction. Not much. Enough. Her lashes fluttered once. Surprise contained. The movement of her hands did not change, but her voice did. Softer, closer. "If you can hear me," she murmured, pretending to examine the tape at my temple. "Blink twice." I blinked twice. She did not look startled. She did not gasp or straighten, only a delicate nod, as if she had already suspected. "If you are in danger from someone who will come into this room," she added, "blink once." I blinked once. Relief rushed through me so hard my eyes burned. She squeezed my wrist in a swift human pulse. "Okay," she whispered, almost soundless. "I believe you." The door opened. The air changed. Melissa's perfume arrived before her voice. Sweet, floral, the memory of birthdays and holidays and 1,000 practiced embraces. Footsteps. A doctor spoke to her at the threshold. "You can have a minute. We're stabilizing her." "Thank you," she sobbed softly. Then she was beside me, a shadow at the edge of my vision, a hand hovering above mine like a blessing hanging from a wire. "Mom," she breathed, so tender that if I had not fallen from a cliff, I might have believed her. "Oh, Mom, this is a nightmare. If you can hear me, forgive me for not saving you. Forgive me for not being enough." The nurse, Nina, Inez, an angel with a badge, busied herself at the monitor, giving us the fiction of privacy while not leaving us alone. Melissa leaned in until her hair brushed my cheek. In that veil of strands and scent, her whisper cooled to its metal. "I told you," she said. So soft the words were almost only breath. "Curiosity kills. You should have sold the house. You should have signed what I asked. Now, the mountain has done it for you." Across the bed, the nurse's pen stopped mid-stroke, just enough to tell me she'd heard. Heat laced my limbs. My fingers twitched beneath the sheet, a traitorous spark. The nurse stepped lightly, placing 2 fingertips on my wrist as if to take a pulse, anchoring my hand. Her reflexes are active, she said to no one. A sentence for the room, a message for me to be still. Melissa straightened, voice rising to grieving pitch. "Doctor, will she wake up?" she asked, the picture of a trembling spouse-in-law desperate for hope. "It's too early to say," came the physician's even reply. "She's stable for now. We need time." "I'll pray," Melissa said, and pressed the back of her hand to her eyes. No tears touched her skin. When she left, the air exhaled. The nurse leaned close again, her face a careful map of professional calm. "You're not safe with her," she said very quietly. "I'm calling hospital security and the on-call investigator. If you can, keep pretending. If you cannot, squeeze my fingers now." I did not squeeze, not because I doubted her, but because the theater that had kept me breathing might still be the only thing between me and a fall no rope could break. She nodded, understood. Then louder, brisk. "We're taking you to imaging. Let's move." They wheeled me into corridors that smelled of iodine and new paint, through a door that thumped shut with a weight that promised privacy. In the CT suite, machines hummed like bees. The technician explained the process as if I were conscious. The nurse answered for me, steady, normal. Between their words moved a current, an understanding that a story was waiting to be told, and that I was holding it like someone sheltering a match in a windstorm. When the scan ended, they returned me to a room that was no longer the same. 2 uniformed officers stood near the window. A woman with a slim leather folio, hospital risk, or social work, or legal, waited at the foot of the bed. The nurse set the brakes, checked a line, and then looked at me in a way that asked a question I had to answer. I let my eyelids rise, slowly. The officers did not react with surprise. The woman with the folio came closer, her voice gentle. "Mrs. Helen," she said, using my name like a hand extended. "My name is Kara. If you can understand me, blink once." I blinked once. The relief on the nurse's face was a sunrise. "Good," Kara said softly. "We're here to help you. We're going to limit visitors to immediate family only, and only when a staff member is present. Do you understand?" I blinked again. "Your daughter-in-law has been informed," one officer added carefully. "We'll be speaking with her." A tremor slid through me, not of fear, but of something like vindication, thin and fierce. I wanted to ask about Michael, but my voice was a scraped-out thing that would not rise. The nurse must have read my eyes. "Your son is alive," she said, blessing the room with the words I needed most. "He's in surgery. The team is excellent. We are watching him. Alive." The word lay across me like a warm blanket. Kara lowered her voice further. "When you are ready to speak, we'll take your statement. Until then, rest. We will keep her away." Rest seemed an impossible country. My mind whirled through rooms I had not entered in years. The morning Michael left for his first job, the evening Michael brought Melissa into our kitchen, cheeks pink from the cold, eyes bright with a future I thought I could bless. The afternoon Robert sketched out a small cabin we might build when the shop no longer filled his days. So many doors, and behind one of them, a locked drawer in his workshop. A false bottom, a secret folder, proof. I woke tonight. The nurse with the steady eyes was there, charting, humming under her breath. A different officer stood by the door, a silhouette against the blue TV light that pooled from a mounted screen, showing a nature documentary without sound. When she noticed me looking, she set the chart aside and moved to the bedside. "Do you want to try a few words?" she asked gently. "Just a few?" I nodded. It felt like lifting a boulder with my chin. She adjusted the mask, turned a dial, and gave me a moment. The first breath of slightly warmer oxygen soothed my throat. I shaped my lips around the simplest truth. "She," I whispered, a reed in wind. "She pushed." The nurse's eyes softened, but her mouth stayed composed. "I hear you," she said. "We'll document when you're stronger. For now, conserve energy." "Michael?" I managed. "In recovery," she said. "The surgeons are pleased." Tears welled. Not hot this time, but cool, exhausted. I let them come. Morning arrived bearing flowers that smelled like contrition and fear. They were signed with Melissa's careful script. The officers logged them, then removed them from the room. "No gifts right now," the taller one said, almost apologetic. "Chain of custody." By noon, Kara returned with a recorder I could have mistaken for a small remote. She asked if I felt ready. The nurse hovered like a lighthouse. I nodded, and they closed the door. "What happened on the mountain?" Kara asked, voice low, cadence slow, leaving space between each word as if she were laying stepping stones across a river. I told them, not with the force I imagined when rage was fresh, but with a steady recounting that matched the beat of the monitor by my bed. I began with the invitation. I described the practiced sweetness, the new camera, the way Melissa's hand gripped Michael's fingers until his knuckles blanched. I told them about the side trail, the loose rock, the command to step back. I told them about the shove, the fall, the whisper that saved me. "Did she speak after the fall?" Kara asked. "She did," I said, voice gaining a small strength from the simple act of being heard. She said, "Now it's all ours." Later, at the hospital, she told me the mountain had done what I would not. The officers exchanged a look that was not surprise. Kara's pen moved. "Your son mentioned to the surgical team that there might be financial pressure," she said gently. "If there are documents, we'll need them." "In the workshop," I said. "Robert's tool chest. False bottom." "Who is Robert?" she asked. "My husband," I answered, and the past tense rose in my throat like a stone I could not swallow. The word broke. The nurse's hand closed around mine. I finished the sentence on a breath. "He kept notes. We'll secure the property," one officer said. "With your permission," I gave it. Papers might vanish on their own. In the hands of Melissa, they would evaporate. They left to begin the work that turns stories into evidence. The nurse adjusted a blanket and dimmed the overheads. "You did well," she said, and I realized how long it had been since praise hadn't sounded like permission. In the evening, Melissa returned with a lawyer whose suit fit like a new skin. Security held them at the threshold. "Immediate family only," the guard recited. "I am immediate family," Melissa said, her voice moving from silk to wire in one breath. "I am her daughter-in-law, and you may see her," the guard replied smoothly. With a clinician present for a brief time, they entered. The lawyer offered a smile that did not crinkle his eyes. "Mrs. Helen," he said, his tone as neutral as hospital paint, "I am here to ensure you are comfortable. My client is very concerned." I looked at the nurse. She nodded once, tiny, nearly imperceptible, a signal that I was not alone. I let my lips part just enough to shape words that were soft and flat and carried no more than they must. "I am resting," I said. "Please keep it quiet." Melissa's eyes glittered. "Of course," she breathed. She leaned near. "We'll talk when you're stronger," she whispered into the shell of my ear, and if the words were innocent, the breath that carried them was not. "We have so much to decide." When they left, the room emptied as if someone had opened a drain. I wanted to sleep for a week and wake in a world where love did not sharpen into a blade. The nurse recorded my vitals, then lingered. "We'll get there," she said, not specifying where. It was enough. At dawn the next day, the officers returned with news that loosened a knot I had not realized was strangling me. "We executed a warrant," the shorter one said. "We have the folder from the tool chest, bank records, email printouts, notes of conversations. We also retrieved a small voice recorder from the garage. It contains snippets of discussions between your son and his spouse." The room tilted. What do they say?" I asked. "We'll catalog before we share," he said carefully. "But preliminarily, there are references to debt, to pressure from lenders, and to a plan to change your living situation." "Sell the house," I whispered. "Sell the house," he confirmed. The nurse's hand found my shoulder. She did not press down. She anchored. "There's something else," the taller officer added. "A neighbor's doorbell camera captured a conversation last week. Your daughter-in-law on the phone, telling someone that the mountain would be perfect." I closed my eyes. Relief and sorrow braided into a rope that held me upright and pulled me apart. By late afternoon, Michael was wheeled into my room, paler than parchment, eyes closed, breathing even. Tubes traced pale lines along his arms. A nurse set the brakes, checked the monitors, and stepped aside so I could see him fully. He looked younger asleep, the way children do when worry lifts for a moment. I wanted to stroke his hair, the way I had when fevers burned away his appetite and nightmares stole his rest. I could not reach. I let my eyes do the touching. "Talk to him," the nurse said. "Hearing is stubborn. It stays." "Michael," I said, voice no longer a stranger in my throat. "We told them. We showed them where the truth lives. You did so well on that mountain. You saved me with 4 words. I need you to save yourself now. Come back. His lashes trembled. A miracle, small and defiant. That evening, as the sun bled gold into the blinds, Kara returned with an update. The district attorney has been briefed, she said. They're preparing charges. Attempted murder, fraud, possibly conspiracy. They'll move fast. I nodded. Moving fast felt like mercy. When night pressed its cool hand against the window, the guard at the door stiffened. Footsteps approached. A voice I recognized drifted in from the hall, tight and urgent. I need to see my husband, Melissa said. You cannot keep me away. The guard spoke with the patience of someone who has said the same sentence 100 times. Visiting hours are over. Return in the morning. No, she said, and her tone slipped, just for a heartbeat, revealing iron beneath silk. Now, a second voice intervened, crisp as paper. Ma'am, please step back. Detectives would like a word. Silence. Then the slow creak of a mask settling into place. Of course, Melissa murmured. Anything I can do to help. The footsteps receded. The guard exhaled. The nurse and I looked at one another and did not speak. There are prayers that exist beyond words. In the morning, the officers came early. They did not smile. She is in custody, the taller one said simply. Your statement, your son's early account, the documents, the audio, the camera footage, it was enough. Outside the window, a bird landed on the sill, tilted its head, and flew away. The ordinary world kept going, as it does. Birthdays would still be celebrated. Bread would still rise. Sunlight would still warm the floorboards where my grandchildren's toys once scattered like bright crumbs. Grief and relief passed through me in waves. When they receded, they left something steadier behind. The nurse squeezed my hand, and for the first time since the cliff, I let myself lean into the weight of being held. You're safe, she said. Safe did not mean finished. It meant we could begin. The morning after Melissa's arrest, the hospital corridors felt lighter, though the air still carried the hum of tension. I woke to the muted sound of television voices from another room, the clatter of carts, the steady rhythm of my monitor. When I turned my head, I saw Michael. He was in the bed beside mine now, no longer in the surgical ward. His skin was pale, his lips cracked, but his chest rose and fell in a steady rhythm. His eyes were closed, lashes fluttering, as if he were walking through a dream. I whispered his name, Michael. At first, there was no response. Then, slowly, his eyelids lifted. His gaze was unfocused, clouded with pain and medicine. But when it finally settled on me, my heart leapt. Mom, he croaked, his voice hoarse. Tears filled my eyes. Yes, sweetheart, I'm here. He tried to move his hand, but tubes restrained him. I reached across the small space between us, my fingers brushing his. It was enough. For several minutes, we just breathed together, the silence filled with relief. Then his lips moved again. Is she? I knew who he meant. She's in custody, I said firmly. The police have the documents your father kept. They have recordings and even video of her planning this. It's over, Michael. But his face twisted, not with relief, but with guilt. No, Mom, it's not over. There's more. My heart sank. What do you mean? He swallowed hard, wincing at the pain. I didn't tell you everything. About the debts. About the people Melissa brought into our lives. They're dangerous. She promised them money when the inheritance came through. If I didn't agree, they threatened my kids. His eyes brimmed with tears. I thought I was protecting them. That's why I kept quiet. A cold chill spread through me. It was worse than I had imagined. Melissa hadn't just wanted the inheritance for herself. She had entangled Michael in a web of debts and threats, making him complicit in her plan without even realizing the full scope. We'll protect them, I said fiercely. Your children are safe. I'll make sure of it. His voice cracked. But Mom, you'll have to testify. You'll have to tell them everything, even the parts that make me look weak. I squeezed his fingers. Michael, you are not weak. You were trapped, manipulated. But now the truth is out, and the truth is stronger than her lies. He closed his eyes, a tear slipping down his cheek. I don't deserve you. You're my son, I whispered, and nothing will ever change that. Later that afternoon, the detectives returned. They carried folders, recorders, and the kind of weary expressions that belong to people who have seen too much. Detective Johnson, the older of the two, spoke first. Mrs. Helen, Mr. Michael, We need to prepare you both for what's coming. Melissa has already started trying to negotiate with the district attorney. She's claiming she acted out of desperation, that your son pressured her into it. Michael's face went white. She's blaming me? Johnson nodded grimly. She says the debts were his, that she was only trying to help, and that things spiraled out of control. She's painting herself as another victim. I clenched my fists, fury rising in my chest. She pushed us with her own hands. She looked me in the eye and told me the mountain had done what I wouldn't. That's not desperation. That's murder. The detective nodded. I believe you. And with the evidence we've collected, the jury will too. But we'll need your testimony to seal it. Both of you. Michael swallowed hard. I'll do it. Whatever it takes. I looked at him. My son who had been broken and rebuilt by both love and betrayal. And I nodded. So will I. The weeks that followed were a blur of physical therapy, police interviews, and visits from lawyers. Each day I grew a little stronger, though my body still carried the weight of the fall. Each night I lay awake, haunted by Melissa's laughter on the cliff, her whisper in the hospital room. Michael struggled with his own demons. He confessed more details about the debts, about late-night calls and visits from men whose names he never knew. He described Melissa's calmness in the face of those threats, how she had always seemed one step ahead, as if the danger didn't scare her, because she had already chosen her solution. She was going to kill you eventually, he said one night, his voice trembling. Even if the debts hadn't been there, she wanted everything. I believed him, because I had seen the hunger in Melissa's eyes long before that day on the cliff. Finally, the day came when we were discharged from the hospital. Walking out of those doors was harder than I had imagined. The sunlight felt too bright, the air too sharp, as though the world had moved on without us. But I held Michael's hand, and together we stepped into the waiting car that would take us home. Home, or what was left of it. When we walked through the door of the house, everything was exactly as we had left it. Dishes still in the sink, blankets draped over the couch, a vase of flowers Melissa had brought, now withered and brown. It felt less like home and more like a crime scene. Michael wandered through the rooms like a ghost, his fingers brushing the walls, the furniture. She touched everything, he whispered. She was always planning. I put my arm around him. But she doesn't own any of it, not anymore. This is still our home. But in truth, I knew it would never feel the same again. The trial loomed ahead like a mountain taller than the one that had almost killed us. Reporters camped outside. Headlines called it the family cliff case and the heiress murder plot. Strangers debated our lives on television, speculating about motives and secrets they could never truly understand. Our lawyer, Albert, sat with us one evening in the living room, his glasses perched low on his nose. They'll try to break you, he warned. They'll say you're confused, that your injuries clouded your memory. They'll dig into your finances, into Michael's debts. They'll try to twist everything, but you must stay steady. The jury needs to hear the truth from your lips. Michael nodded solemnly. I did too, though inside I trembled, because the truth was heavy, and telling it meant reliving every step, every whisper, every betrayal. But I knew we had no choice. The courthouse smelled of polished wood and cold stone. Reporters crowded the steps, cameras flashing like lightning as Michael and I were escorted inside. Every shout from the crowd was a reminder that our private nightmare had become a public spectacle. This way, Mrs. Helen, the bailiff said gently, guiding me with a steadying arm. Michael walked beside me, slower than before the accident, but determined. Inside, the courtroom was already buzzing. On one side, friends, neighbors, strangers who wanted to witness the drama. On the other, Melissa, dressed in a modest navy suit, her hair pulled back into a simple bun. She looked every bit the grieving widow, pale, composed, even fragile. If I hadn't known the truth, I might have believed her, but I did know. I remembered her laughter on the cliff, the cold steel in her whisper. The judge entered, and the room rose. The trial began. The prosecution started with the evidence. Photographs of the gorge, testimony from the rescue team, audio from the recorder Robert had hidden. The jury listened, some leaning forward, others shaking their heads. Then came the financial documents, debts in Michael's name, forged signatures, Melissa's voice on recordings discussing the mountain being perfect. The prosecutor's voice was steady. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this was not an accident. This was a calculated attempt to eliminate every obstacle between Melissa and the inheritance she craved. She manipulated her husband's debts, pressured her in-laws, and when persuasion failed, she turned to violence. Melissa sat motionless, her hands folded neatly on the table. Only her eyes betrayed her, flashing with sparks of anger when the evidence cut too close. Then it was the defense's turn. Melissa's lawyer stood, his voice smooth, his tone sympathetic. What we have here is a tragedy. A family destroyed by financial strain, by secrets, by desperation. My client, Melissa, loved her husband. She loved her in-laws. But she was caught in a storm she did not create. Michael's debts, his recklessness, his shame, these drove the family into ruin. Melissa only tried to help. And when the accident happened, she was devastated. He paused, letting the weight of his words hang in the air. Then he gestured toward Michael. The prosecution wants you to see Melissa as a monster. But ask yourselves, who had the most to lose? Who had debts so large he risked his own children's safety? Who stood to benefit most from his parents' estate? It was Michael, not Melissa. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Michael's face went pale, his hands trembling on the table. I leaned toward him, whispering fiercely, "Don't let her break you. The truth will win." But I could see the doubt in his eyes. Melissa's mask was convincing, her lies polished until they shone like truth. Then came the hardest part, our testimonies. Michael went first. He walked slowly to the stand, his steps uneven, his body still recovering from the fall. His voice was shaky at first, but as he described the cliff, the shove, Melissa's cold words, strength returned to him. "She pushed us," he said, his eyes fixed on the jury. "She wanted my parents gone. She told me we'd be free once they were out of the way. But when I realized what she meant, it was too late. She didn't want us. She wanted everything for herself." Melissa's lawyer pounced in cross-examination. "Mr. Michael, isn't it true that you were drowning in debt? That you took out loans from dangerous people? That you had more to gain from your parents' estate than anyone else?" Michael's jaw tightened. "Yes, I was in debt, but I never wanted them dead. Melissa was the one who pushed them. She was the one who whispered it was time. She planned it." "Or," the lawyer pressed, "are you blaming her to save yourself?" Michael's voice broke, but he didn't look away. "No, I'm telling the truth." Finally, it was my turn. As I walked to the stand, the weight of every eye pressed on me. My cane tapped softly against the wood floor, each step echoing louder than I felt inside. I sat, swore the oath, and looked at the jury. "My name is Helen," I began, my voice steady despite the quake in my heart. "I am 62 years old, and I survived because my son whispered 4 words to me on that mountain. 'Mom, pretend you're dead.' I told them everything. From the first moment I suspected Melissa's sweetness was an act, to the day she insisted on the mountain trip, to the shove that sent us into the abyss. I described her words. 'Now it's all ours.' And the whisper in the hospital when she leaned close and told me the mountain had done what I wouldn't. Every word carried the weight of truth. Every pause held the silence of years of love betrayed. When I finished, the courtroom was so quiet I could hear my own breathing. Melissa's lawyer approached, his smile practiced, his tone falsely kind. "Mrs. Helen, you've been through immense trauma. You suffered serious injuries. Is it possible that your memory has blurred? That you've misinterpreted Melissa's grief as malice?" I looked him straight in the eye. "I know what I saw, I know what I heard, and I know who pushed me." He shifted tactics. "Is it not true that your son confessed to debts, to shame, to fearing for his children's safety? Doesn't that give him motive?" "Yes," I said firmly. "He had debts, he had shame, but he never had malice. Melissa did. And that's the difference." The lawyer hesitated, then stepped back. No further questions. When I stepped down from the stand, Melissa's eyes locked onto mine. For the first time, her mask slipped, and I saw the fury beneath, a silent promise, a warning. But I no longer feared her, because the truth was out, and the truth was stronger than her lies. The closing argument stretched for hours, each side painting its own picture of what had happened on that mountain. The prosecution spoke of betrayal, greed, and cold calculation. The defense clung to the narrative of accident, desperation, and financial strain. When the jury finally left to deliberate, silence settled over the courtroom. I sat beside Michael, our lawyer Albert on the other side, and we waited. Minutes became hours. I watched the clock hands crawl forward, every tick a hammer against my ribs. Melissa sat across the room, her composure intact, as though she were waiting for a bus instead of the verdict that would decide her life. At one point, she caught my eye and smiled faintly, a smile that held no fear, only contempt. But inside me there was no more room for fear. I had lived through the worst she could do. Whatever came next, I would endure. Finally, the bailiff entered. "The jury has reached a verdict." The words sent a shiver through the room. Everyone rose as the jurors filed back in, their faces unreadable. I clutched Michael's hand beneath the table. The foreman stood, a folded paper in his hand. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Melissa Carter, guilty of attempted murder in the first degree, guilty of conspiracy to commit murder, guilty of financial fraud, guilty of perjury." A gasp rippled through the room. Melissa's mask cracked at last. Her face twisted, her lips parted as if to speak, but no sound came. For the first time she looked small, not fragile in the way she had pretended, but stripped of power, her lies burned away. Then the foreman continued, "We find the co-defendant, Michael Carter, not guilty." My son collapsed forward, sobbing into his hands. I pulled him close, my own tears spilling freely. The weight that had crushed us for months, for years, lifted in that moment. Melissa erupted, her voice shrill. "This is a lie! You don't understand! He's the one, he made me do it!" She lunged forward, but deputies caught her, forcing her back into her chair. The judge's gavel slammed down. "Order! Order in the court!" But Melissa didn't stop. "You'll regret this!" She screamed at me, her voice echoing against the wood-paneled walls. "You think you've won, Helen? You'll never escape me!" They dragged her out, her words dissolving into incoherent shrieks. And just like that, it was over. The weeks that followed were quieter, but not peaceful. Reporters hounded us. Neighbors whispered. Strangers recognized my face at the grocery store. But through it all, one truth held me steady. Melissa was behind bars. Michael began the long process of rebuilding his life. He attended therapy, spoke with financial advisors, and slowly untangled himself from the debts Melissa had woven around him. It wasn't easy, but it was honest. And for the first time in years, I saw light return to his eyes. The children, my grandchildren, were placed in temporary foster care at first. The thought of them growing up without family shattered me, so I filed for custody. The court reviewed my case carefully, considering my age, my injuries, my ability to provide stability. But when I walked into that room and looked into my grandchildren's frightened eyes, I knew there was no other choice. Weeks later, the judge granted me guardianship. The first night they came to live with me, the house felt alive again. Toys scattered across the floor, laughter echoing in the halls, small feet racing down the stairs. The shadows Melissa had left began to fade beneath the light of their innocence. Still, there were scars. They asked about their mother, their father. Why couldn't they see her? Why did Daddy cry at night? I answered as best I could, never with lies, but with words soft enough to protect their fragile hearts. "Your mommy made some bad choices," I told them gently. "Choices that hurt people. But you are safe now. You are loved. That's what matters." And every night, when I tucked them in, I whispered the same prayer, that the darkness Melissa had planted would never touch them again. Months later, when Melissa's sentencing arrived, I chose to attend. I needed to hear the words spoken aloud, to close the chapter completely. The judge's voice was firm, his gavel final. "Melissa Carter, for the crimes of attempted murder, conspiracy, and fraud, you are hereby sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole." Melissa stood, her hands cuffed, her eyes burning with a venom that reached across the room to me. "You think you've won," she hissed as deputies pulled her away. "But this isn't the end." I didn't flinch, because I knew the truth. The end had already come, the moment she tried to take everything and lost it all instead. Now, as I sit on the porch in the quiet of evening, the children asleep inside, I think back to that day on the mountain, the rush of wind, the endless drop, the whisper that saved my life. "Mom, pretend you're dead." Those words kept me alive long enough to fight, long enough to protect my family from a woman who had nearly destroyed it. And though I carry scars, visible and invisible, I also carry strength. The strength to raise my grandchildren with love instead of lies. The strength to forgive my son for the mistakes that nearly cost us everything. The strength to keep living, even when death brushed so close. I lift my eyes to the stars above, the same stars Robert and I once dreamed under, and I whisper a promise. We survived, and we will live, truly live. And if my story touched you, if it made you think about trust, about family, about survival, I ask only one thing: don't let it end here. Subscribe so you never miss the next story. Because sometimes the truth is stranger than any fiction, and what happened to me could happen to anyone.